Hopefully, as I'm sure I am, y'all are a fan of Mexican food. Most people are. And sometimes it can be a little heavy in saturated fat and sodium. And so today I'm going to kind of show you some ways that we can cut fat and calories and still have it taste really, really good. So some of my tips are definitely to add vegetables. I think we can all use more vegetables in our diet. Eat as many vegetables as we possibly can. They're so healthy for you, and they're definitely a great way to cut calories and increase fiber, and they're fat-free, so except for the avocado. And so they're just a great way to make your dish healthier. Some of my favorite vegetables to add to Mexican dishes include lettuce, tomato, onion and garlic, jalapeno. And so if you do add avocado, just keep in mind that although it's a very healthy fat, it is kind of high in calories. So if you're watching calories, you might want to limit yourself to just 1/8 of the avocado or 1/4 of the avocado. But there's a ton of vegetables that are great in Mexican dishes, and we're going to kind of go over that, but these are just some ideas. So some other tips is instead of flour tortillas, using corn or whole wheat tortillas. Today our spinach enchiladas are made with whole wheat tortillas. Choosing brown rice instead of white rice is another one. Something I like to point out is that it's probably a good idea to choose rice or beans as a side. You know, traditional Mexican dishes have the rice and the beans, and if you're a diabetic, that can kind of be carbohydrate and carbohydrate with more carbohydrate. And so it's just kind of something to keep in mind. You might want to either limit portion sizes or choose one or the other. Another thing that I like to use is, has anybody heard of the plain non-fat Greek yogurt? Does anybody use that?
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of that. It's so creamy and it tastes so good, and so I use that on my nachos, taco salad, enchiladas, you name it, it's on there. It's very, very good, and like I said, it's non-fat, so it's yogurt, so it's a great source of calcium and protein, and so I'm a huge fan of that. Also, just to keep in mind to go easy on the cheese. It's kind of easier to do when you're cooking your own meal than when you're out at a restaurant. And when you are cooking your own meal, I recommend that you're using the reduced fat cheese, and that's what we used in our spinach enchiladas today. And just remember portion sizes. A lot of times we can cut calories just by eating less and reducing portion sizes. And so something that I do when I go out to eat is that I'll get my plate and kind of section out the rice and section out the beans and scoop my enchiladas apart and just eat half of everything and then take the other half home. And that way you're getting half the calories, half the fat really easily, and then you have another lunch to eat the next day. So that's something that I personally do when I go out to eat, whether it be Mexican food or Italian food or whatever. So the first thing that we're going to go over is Crock Pot Black beans, and whenever Alicia gets back, she's going to kind of help me pass out the samples. And so the Crock Pot Black beans I made with onion and garlic, cumin, a little bit of salt. And something I wanted to point out is if you ever slow cook black beans, it's important to keep in mind to add the salt at the end. And that is because if you add it in the beginning, then the beans might be a little bit tougher than you originally planned for. So that's a mistake I made the first time I made them. And then also, so that same thing goes with broth. I wouldn't recommend using broth because it has sodium in it, and that can make your beans a little tough as well. And so this is kind of just goes over the ingredients and the directions, but it's really easy. What I did is I started preparing these last night, and I just stuck the onion and the garlic and the jalapeno in the food processor. This is really quick. And then this morning I just did the beans and the water and the onion and the garlic, put it on low, let it slow cook all day, added a little cumin and salt at the end, and they're ready to go. So Alicia, whenever you get a chance, would you mind passing out the samples of the black beans? We can get y'all starting to eat.
That's right.
Okay.
It says soak them. Did you soak them overnight?
Oh, I'm glad that you mentioned that. Yes, I do soak my beans overnight. While that's not required, I personally have heard that it kind of helps with them causing a little bit less gas, which is important. I feel like everybody could use that. And then they're also a little bit quicker to cook that way. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I do soak them and then rinse them next morning. And I hear that with brown rice, if you soak it the night before, it cooks just as quick as white rice. If you ever try to cook Brown rice, it takes a little bit longer to cook, so that's something to keep in mind. Okay, and beans are great because they have a lot of fiber, they have a lot of protein, they can be as low in fat as in sodium as you want them to be. When you're making your own beans, you don't have to add any salt or fat if you don't want it in there. You just add as much as you like. So one of my personal favorites is black bean tacos. I honestly make these probably weekly because they are so easy and they're quick and they take less than 15 minutes. You can use canned beans, you can use beans that you've made yourself, and you just do the tortilla, the beans, a little bit of cheese, and then whatever vegetables that you want, which is also on your handout. And so the next thing is black bean tostadas. Again, you can use canned beans, you can use the crock pot black beans, and same kind of concept, takes less than 15 minutes to make. You can either bake your own tostada shells, which Alicia, I think you've done before, right?
Yes.
Okay, so do you want to explain how to go about doing that?
What I normally do is I actually just spray with a little bit of the non-stick cooking spray, and then you can place them on a baking sheet or you can place them on the actual oven rack itself. And if you really want to actually bake like an actual taco shell, you can actually take your corn tortilla and just kind of fold it over one of the rungs on the rack, and it will bake. The only thing is you have to use them immediately. The longer they sit, the more moisture they're going to gather, and the softer, the chewier they'll get. So that's just one of my favorite things that I usually do.
Yeah, so that's a great way to make your own tostada shells. And then again with the beans, and this time what I do for the tostadas is I mix them with a little bit of like chili powder, just give them a little bit of flavor, and mash them up so they stay on the shell better. And then again with the cheese and then whatever kind of vegetable toppings that you like on them. Okay, now on to spinach enchiladas. This is another one of my absolute favorites. My husband is in love with these. He's this huge guy, typical guy, but this is his favorite dish. And anytime I'm like, honey, what do you want for dinner? He's like, spinach enchiladas. I kid you not. He gets very excited about them. So once we get done passing out the beans, we'll go ahead and let you taste the spinach enchiladas, but I'll go ahead and go over how I make those. They're very easy. They only have 4 ingredients. And so you're just going to get your pan and spray it with your non-stick cooking spray. You're going to do a little bit, you can get a can of enchilada sauce. They also very much so encourage you to make your own enchilada sauce. It's a great way to cut sodium. And so you're just going to do a little bit of enchilada sauce on the bottom of the pan, and then you get your tortilla, which is preferably whole wheat, and then your spinach. I use frozen spinach. You can use fresh. The only thing is if you use fresh spinach, you have to use a whole lot more. And so spinach, once you boil it and you pat the water out, it's already condensed and you can lay it right in there. Fresh spinach, you're going to have to use a lot of fresh spinach because, you get a whole bag and then you cook it down and it's like one enchilada worth. So you might want to do the frozen spinach. So you get your tortilla, you get your cooked frozen spinach, the cheese, wrap it up, seam side down, put it in the pan, cover it with enchilada sauce, a little bit more cheese. It's very, very good. So we'll let you try it in just a moment. Okay, so now I'm going to show y'all my homemade salsa recipe. So what we're going to start with is we're going to start with about 5 tomatoes. You can do more or less depending on how much salsa that you want to make. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting those in the food processor. And this sauce is so easy just because you kind of throw everything in the food processor and let that do the work. So I'm just going to help the food processor out a little bit by chopping these. Do any of y'all like to make your own salsa at home? Yeah, it's pretty easy and it's great to do for parties and for Mexican food, and it's my go-to thing to make for parties. I do salsa and guacamole, and Alicia taught me how to bake chips. Do you want to tell them about how you bake the chips?
Well, kind of the same concept with the tostada. It's just spraying with the non-cook spray. I cut them into the triangles just so they kind of look like a regular chip. You can do the corn or the flour, whichever you want to do. And then just bake them in the oven about 350 for probably about 10-15 minutes. Just putting in every oven is a little bit different, so you might want to watch it a little bit. And you just want to make sure it cooks all the way through. Sometimes you'll have ones towards the middle that are a little bit softer, kind of bendy. You want to kind of rotate those and stir them. And then that's it. And again, the sooner you use them, the better. Again, moisture is your enemy when it comes to baking those things because they will start to absorb that moisture and do kind of get a little bit chewy over time. But if you use it, that day, then you're using perfectly fine.
And we are adding jalapenos. Do y'all like y'all's salsa really spicy or a little spicy or not spicy?
I do.
Variants.
Variances. Okay, so what I like to do is when I'm not sure, like if I'm entertaining for a party, is I'll actually de-seed half the jalapeno. And that way you still get some of the spiciness, but not as much as if you would have left all the seeds and veins in there. And so that's something I do anytime I use jalapenos in recipes. And that was a trick that my friend taught me that is tried and true today. Because if you just see the whole thing, you don't get much spice at all. But if you throw the whole thing in there, it can be a little much. So I'm going to go ahead and do 2 just because we got a lot of tomatoes in there. And I think we'll be okay. Do any of y'all have any questions about anything that we've gone over so far? No? Okay, so far we've done tomatoes, jalapenos, cilantro. I'm going to do a little bit of garlic and then onions. Something else you can do is if you want to keep it around in your fridge for like a week or 2, is add like lime juice or vinegar, and because of the acidity, it's a natural preservative. And so that's a great idea if you want to make it for dinner, but you're going to know that you're going to have leftovers. So I saw that y'all got to try the beans. Did y'all like those okay?
Yeah, they were good.
Great, great. And so like I said, you can see how easy it would be to make tacos out of those, put those on nachos, mash them up and put them on tostadas, even have them as a side dish and just enjoy those all week long.
Remind people about pressing the garlic.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. If you press the garlic, it makes peeling it much, much easier. So I don't know if y'all ever tried peeling garlic. Sometimes it can be a pain in the butt, but you press it. You press it with a knife, and I'll do one more in case y'all missed it. It makes it much easier. So I usually cut off the end, and then I press it down with the side of the knife, and then the skin usually just comes right off after that. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Now we'll do a little bit of onion.
What kind of a knife are you using?
You know, I'm not sure.
It's a regular.
It's the office. Sorry, I took advantage of it, but
It's our official cooking demo knife.
Seems to work good.
Yeah, and a good knife is really important. If you have a dull knife at home, that can actually be a lot more dangerous than a sharp knife. So I always recommend keeping your knives very sharp because it not only makes your job in the kitchen a whole heck of a lot easier, but it's actually a lot safer. With a dull knife, it requires a little bit more effort, and that can make you, nick yourself or slip and cut yourself, and nobody wants that. Okay, so we got the onion, the garlic, the jalapeno, the cilantro, the tomato, and now we're just going to let the processor do its job. Oh, that's good. Make sure it all gets down in there. Okay, I think that's good. So you can see with the food processor how it makes it much, much easier. I think that will be good. So we'll go ahead and put that in a bowl. Use this one. And so this is kind of a chunky salsa. If you wanted it more not so chunky, you could either process it longer or add another tomato, and that would do the trick.